You can't just hear a bad idea like men can be women and just laugh at that and say that's silly. There's no reason to believe that. Instead, you now have to construct an argument as to why men cannot be women.
Ben's saying that it's a bad thing that I just can't laugh at trans people and say that they're stupid and delusional anymore. I have to actually argue against them. I think that you should be able to construct arguments for things that are good and arguments against things that are bad. Laughing at someone because they're different from you is not a very good argument. In fact, that's just the ad populum fallacy again. Not all heroes tuck. Dylan Mulvaney is the perfect example of societal corruption. Vinny Boy over here is just obsessed with Dylan Mulvaney. He had a video talking about how Dylan appeared on like a makeup podcast, and he's like, trans women can't do makeup because trans women are men. And it's like, dude, chill out. You wear stage makeup. Everybody in your profession wears stage makeup. He's just upset that a trans woman, like, was with a makeup company. He also had a video talking about where Caitlyn Jenner, like, misgendered Dylan Mulvaney, which was pretty gross for, like, a trans person to misgender another trans person. And now Ben Shapiro has another video talking about Dylan Mulvaney. He can't stop talking about her. He is obsessed. And apparently, this is the perfect example of societal corruption. So, big claims. Let's go for it.
2 weeks ago, the President of the United States hosted a human named Dylan Mulvaney to the White House. Mulvaney is a TikTok star and former actor who starred in Book of Mormon. Nobody had heard of any of this until about March 2020, when Dylan Mulvaney decided that he was actually a woman.
I think people knew about Dylan Mulvaney before she started transitioning. I mean, didn't she have, like, quite a TikTok following before she even came out as trans? Like, people were pretty fond of her work on the Book of Mormon. I don't think you can just say that, like, people just discovered her as soon as she became transgendered. Like, people kind of knew who she was before.
Now he has about 8 million followers on TikTok, was featured by Forbes at their Power Women's Summit, and has a series of contracts with makeup companies, including ad deals with CeraVe, MAC, Neutrogena, and Kate Spade. That's right, men are so unbelievable at being women that one can say he is a woman and become one of the most influential women in America in just 6 months of wearing dresses and ironing his hair.
Is Ben just getting triggered that, like, she has, like, deals with, like, makeup companies and stuff? If you truly believe in the free market, like, why are you getting triggered when the free market makes deals with, like, a trans woman? That's kind of their own prerogative to do so, is, like, the free market. Ben's kind of just getting triggered for no reason.
The patriarchy always wins, gang.
He's trying to adopt feminist rhetoric to be transphobic. That's wild. Ben the feminist, who believes that women should be, like, confined to motherly housewife kind of roles in society. Ben the feminist.
This person, this fellow Mulvaney, he began to document his attempt to become a woman in a series that he dubbed Days of Girlhood. Day 1 featured Mulvaney explaining that he had cried 3 times, had told someone he was fine when he wasn't, and had ordered clothes that had cost too much money. All hallmarks of being a girl, according to him.
In these videos, Dylan has never claimed that this is what it means to be a girl, or, like, that she speaks for all women. She's just saying, I'm a trans woman. This is what I did today. And Ben's getting triggered that Dylan is just talking about what she did today. Is that all it takes to trigger Ben Shapiro?
It's not sexist at all if he says it. That's just what being a woman is, right? Crying too much and fibbing to your friends and spending too much money on clothes.
Dylan has never said that that's what being a woman is. Ben Shapiro is making that up.
It's what women do. See, if I say that, that's an ugly stereotype about women. But if I say I'm a woman, then I have the authority to speak about these ugly stereotypes and pretend that they actually apply.
If only Dylan actually made that claim. But she didn't. She never claimed that that's what womanhood is. She just claimed that that's what she did. That's just her day. So what?
Other days featured Mulvaney, who is the most female of all females, jabbering about the size of his nipples, which have been changed by estrogen shots. Spoiler alert, they are allegedly, according to him, pepperoni-sized. I wish I were kidding. I am not.
Are we just laughing at people that have big nipples now? Is that all it takes to make conservatives laugh? Haha, pizza nips. That's so funny.
And also talking about normalizing his crotch bulge in tight pleather shorts. Because, as we all know, from all of our professors, some women have penises, and we all must acknowledge this simple fact. It's a lot of heroism.
I guess we'll hit the crotch bulge discourse again. It is totally normalized for a dude to have a crotch bulge. It's just a fact that body parts show through clothes a bit. For example, boobs can show a little bit through a bra. A penis can show a little bit through underwear, through pants. That's okay. That's just how human anatomy looks. There is no need to make a big deal out of it.
Not all heroes tuck. So, So naturally, Joe Biden, the president of the United States, the most powerful person on President's Earth, brought Mulvaney to the White House to interview him. Biden doesn't do interviews with actual members of the media who might ask him questions, forcing him to use what is left of his brain. But he does do interviews with men who believe they are women.
There were lots of people that Biden was interviewing that day, and Biden does like media interviews all the time. There are like lots of interviews that Biden does. Ben's just getting triggered because he interviewed a single trans woman. That's all it takes to trigger Ben.
So, Mulvaney donned a trans-colored pantsuit. I'm not kidding you.
Conservatives freak out at the color of clothes that people wear. Obama, tan suit, scared all the conservatives. Dylan Mulvaney, trans suit, scares all the conservatives. We're just repeating the tan suit discourse. We've come full circle to Obama tan suit discourse. This is insane.
Do you think states should have the right to ban gender-affirming healthcare?
No.
Now, for those who don't know, gender-affirming healthcare is a euphemistic misnomer for a series of medical interventions ranging from social transition, where everybody pretends that you're a member of the sex that you claim membership to.
Gender-affirming healthcare would refer to medical transition stuff. I don't think that social transition is medicalized to any extent. That's just like a social thing.
To cross-sex hormones, which would be shooting kids who are boys full of estrogen or girls with testosterone, to mutilation and sterilization surgically, ranging from breast removals and phalloplasties in girls to vaginoplasties in boys. So Joe Biden responded to this question, quote, "I don't think any state or anybody should have the right to do that. As a moral question and as a legal question, I think it is just wrong. It is morally wrong to prevent minors from getting these sorts of quote-unquote treatments."
It is morally wrong for states to intervene and to tell medical boards and override established medical guidelines that are backed by research and data. It is morally wrong for states to intervene and say, no, you can't perform this type of healthcare because my feelings disagree with it. We have studies and data which shows that puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, these things help trans people's mental health profoundly. We should allow the science and the research to run its course, figure out what is the best way we can help trans youth. Putting the government in to say, sorry, you can't follow the established medical guidelines, you have to do something else with your trans kid. That is authoritarian. Imagine if, say, like, the government said, you know what, we don't believe that kids should be prescribed antidepressants, for example. Like, there's no reason for kids to be depressed, they should just be happy. So we're going to ban all antidepressants. If your kid's currently on antidepressants, sorry, they're gonna have to get taken off, try to find a different route. It's very weird for the government to step in and say, you have to not do this type of medical procedure or treatment that is backed by established research guidelines. Don't put authoritarian government into medicine. Let scientists and doctors and researchers figure out what is the best way to treat people and give people the informed consent to engage in the types of healthcare that's going to help them. We already have, established guidelines for teenagers to obtain informed consent for things like ADHD treatment, things like antidepressants, where it requires consent of the parent, consent of the teen, and consent of doctors and therapists that have assessed the teen for months and months and months, years and years, etc. Same thing's true about trans kids. They can have the exact same form of informed consent that we apply for antidepressants, that we apply for ADHD meds, which, by the way, can have permanent effects on your brain and your biology. Let's let the medical community figure out what's best for people, and let's not put the government in the way of the medical community doing so. That is immoral.
So, assume for a second that the President of the United States, his brain is not complete applesauce at this point, so we have to ask a question. How did one of the two major parties in the United States, the entirety of the legacy media, all of academia, and nearly all of corporate America come to believe that transing the children isn't just something that some people could do, it is a moral necessity?
When have people said that, like, transing all the kids is a moral necessity? I think that you should let trans kids transition, but I don't want to trans cis kids. I think that it's wrong for somebody to go through a puberty or be placed into a social role that is not right for them. And that applies equally to cis kids. I'm not trying to trans cis kids. I just want trans kids to be able to express themselves and to be able to get the treatment which medical guidelines have established helps their mental health.
To stop it is some sort of moral wrong. Well, the transing of the kids has become the latest symptom of a far deeper and more profound evil in Western civilization. That evil is the broad redefinition of Western identity as a whole around subjective sexual feeling.
What? That is not what gender identity is about. That's pretty weird. We have been trying to sexualize the very existence of trans people and trans kids. Ben is trying to sexualize the existence of trans kids. That's gross. And I don't know why Ben is trying to make this sexual, because there is nothing inherently sexual about being trans. It's just your gender identity. And that doesn't even have to be related to your sexuality.
The traditional morality sees identity in a different way. Traditionally moral people see identity as a symbiotic relationship between the individual and society, or a mix of biology and the institutions that shape us. Identity lies between those two things. This is why the goal of parenting is to civilize your child. Your child is a bag of emotions. I have 3 of them. They're bags of biological-driven emotions. Okay, they don't have what we would call in Hebrew seichel. They don't have common sense. They have not been civilized, and your job is to get them used to the institutions of civilization so they can interact well with the world. Philosopher Carl Trueman of the University of Utah writes, "It is in communal activities that individuals find their true selves. The true self in traditional cultures is therefore something that is given and learned, not something the individual creates for himself." Today, Western morality has utterly discarded this idea.
How so? People on the left, people that support the affirmation of trans people, also recognize that we are a complex combination of biological and sociological influences. Somebody is transgender, well, there's some biological stuff going on. We have research studies which show that the brains of trans people are more in line with the sex they transition to, even before they medically transition. There's some biological factors going on there. And there are sociological factors that make them want to be perceived and treated as that other gender. Trying to restrict where people can be or what people can do is just kind of weird. You know, let people do what makes them happy, so long as they don't harm anybody else. And trans people are not harming anybody by transitioning. They're simply helping themselves and improving their mental health.
Who we are is not a question of society or institutions or roles. Instead, who we are is a question of internal feeling alone. Any societal force, any institution that crimps how we feel is bad, oppressive, and ought to be destroyed.
That's not what people on the left believe. We believe that gender is so much more than simply an identity. There are sociological aspects of gender. There are aspects of biological sex, and these are all related to the concept of gender identity. But what we rather believe is that in terms of treating people socially, it's kind of weird to like force people into certain boxes based on how they look or based on, how they were raised. Rather, we should let people, break those molds, let people be who they want to be. And if that involves changing their gender, go for it.
Civilization is an institution and an imposition. Institutions are impositions, and therefore they must be destroyed. As Trueman explains, the intuitive moral structure of our modern social imaginary prioritizes victimhood, sees selfhood in psychological terms, regards traditional sexual codes as oppressive and life-denying, and places a premium on the individual's right to define his or her own existence. And the refusal by any individual to recognize an identity society at large recognizes as legitimate is a moral offense, not simply a matter of indifference. You're expected to celebrate everybody's identity, right? Because their identity is how they feel. Now, this redefinition of identity is really, really irrational because it presumes that who you are is your passions, and that true happiness is to be found in the evisceration of all the institutions that allow you to live successfully in the world.
What? Ben is making up this crazy straw man that we're trying to dismantle society or whatever. No, we just want trans people to be supported and affirmed. The social ostracization they face, kind of the marginalization they face from being treated in this little binary box that just isn't right for them. It harms them in terms of their social outcomes. And if we can recognize that they have that identity for a reason and that we can help them socially transition to actually make their lived social experience align with that identity, we can help them medically transition, when they get older, to make their body be more congruent with their mind. Those are things that help people. We're just looking to help people. We're not looking to destroy society. We're just trying to look out for those that are harmed and ostracized by society.
This has a long history. Percy Shelley, husband of Mary Shelley and dissolute poet, wrote, quote, "In fact, religion and morality as they now stand compose a practical code of misery and servitude. The genius of human happiness must tear every leaf from the accursed book of God ere man can read the inscription on his heart." This particular belief system, that sexual passions are the root of who we are, it's not really progressive in any sense. It doesn't progress humanity. Instead, it's a call to return to the animal.
Who is saying that sexual passions make up who we are? I think that we broadly recognize that humans are so much more than their natural inclinations. It tends to be the case that I find that conservatives make the argument that we are just, these biological drives to reproduce or whatever. That seems to be the very kind of conservative gender role arguments. On the left, on the progressive side of things, we believe that, people should be able to be free regardless of the types of people they find themselves attracted to, be they straight, be they gay, be they asexual, etc. People should be free to be themselves in spite of what their sexuality might be. That's not trying to limit or define people solely based on their sexuality. We're, in fact, doing the opposite.
A far more accurate ideological label, and one I've started to use, is transgressive. This philosophy of identity revolves around a program of norm violation, of destroying boundaries and rules and social acceptability, all in the name of liberating the passions. Now, transgressivism does result in deep unhappiness because, after all, we are far more than just whatever we feel like sexually that day. We are embedded beings. We are embedded in time. We are embedded in society. We are embedded into our families. If you remove all of those connections, it leaves people completely aimless.
Where are trans people trying to say that we're trying to destroy the family to make trans people happen? Like, what? That's really wild. No, like, I think that families are great, and that if people want to form families, they should be able to form families.
Link sexual desires with identity. That's the only part of you that matters.
Nobody's claiming that. Literally, nobody's claiming that. Ben's making that up.
Dispenses with the other aspects of individuality that comprise most of who we are. Freedom of action, reason, our sympathies with other people.
So, like, the freedom of action for, like, trans people to transition, if that's what they want? The sympathy for trans kids that are socially ostracized, that are told that they can, you know, never do what's going to make them happy? Where's that on your side, Ben? You are trying to say that that's us when you're the one doing the very thing that you're claiming to be against.
If all you are is a Freudian sex impulse, then you really aren't a person, you're just a Freudian sex impulse.
Good thing the left doesn't believe that. He's literally just arguing against something that we don't believe. That's all that this is.
We are more than that. But transgressivism rejects all of that. Transgressivism treats both behavior and desire as immutable characteristics, like race or sex, thus removing freedom and responsibility.
I don't think anybody believes that behavior is an immutable characteristic. And it's not like sex characteristics are immutable either. Through medical transition, you can change your hormones, you can change your anatomy. It tends to be conservatives that view these things as immutable. I think that Ben is just projecting here.
Right, your interaction with the world, your movement into roles that make you a better and more fulfilled human being. How did we discard that in favor of this newfangled transgressive identity? Well, the truth is that, historically speaking, the new version of identity would have failed because it runs directly contrary to reality. Men who believe they are women, this would be laughed at in most of the world today, let alone throughout history.
So wait, is the argument that because most people in, like, a certain society would laugh at something that it's not valid? That's literally just the ad populum fallacy. He's just saying because, like, what's seen as, like, normal or, like, popular in our society should be seen as what's, like, right. That's literally just a logical fallacy. That's his entire argument, is a logical fallacy. That's pretty funny.
Human beings who define themselves primarily in terms of sexual desires, all of this would have failed, historically speaking.
Who is trying to say that all I am is, like, sexual desires? It's the right that is trying to sexualize LGBTQ people. All throughout Ben's speech, he has tried to paint being trans, being gay, being LGBTQ as something that is inherently sexual, but that's not the case. There are asexual people out there that are trans. There are asexual people out there that are queer and that have, you know, gay relationships. Ben is trying to sexualize us in cases where there's nothing inherently sexual. Ben is projecting everything.
20th century, traditional morality was largely obliterated for three specific reasons. First, religious practice in the West markedly declined. Religion has been, for all of recorded history, societal glue. As religion declines, so too does the moral and social immune system of a society. Religion allows us a shared moral system, principles that create a backdrop of philosophical homogeneity that allow for the weaving of a social fabric. Second, the advance of science and the welfare state lured the West into a false sense of security.
I don't think that, like, religion is necessary for a society to be cohesive. You can have other forms of societal glue, be they cultural. They don't have to be religious in nature. You can have lots of different ways to weave together a cultural fabric that aren't necessarily inherently religious. He just likes religion, and so he's saying that it has to be religion, but they can be other things too. Communities can exist around shared values, shared goals, shared interests, that kind of thing.
The link between action and consequence had been completely severed. Birth control meant that sex was now completely disconnected from the results of sex for literally all of mammalian history.
People were trying to invent contraceptives far before birth control. There are even, like, discussions in the Bible of people that would wrap their downstairs in, like, cloth to prevent pregnancies. There's definitely been separations of sex as, like, pleasure and not, like, reproduction. You know, people have been pulling out and, like, trying to use, like, physical blockages to prevent pregnancy for as long as humans have been around.
Welfare meant that you didn't actually have to pay the consequences of your own action, all of which resulted in incentivization of exactly the sorts of behavior that heretofore had been disincentivized by reality. Third, thanks to the decline in religious practice and the advance of birth control and welfarism, we entered a realm of what I would call pseudo-rationalism. This is a philosophy that suggests that all human behaviors and social rules have to be justified in some way, tabula rasa, via secular humanism. So you can't just hear a bad idea like men can be women and just laugh at that and say that's silly. There's no reason to believe that. Instead, you now have to construct an argument as to why men cannot be women.
Been saying that it's a bad thing that I just can't laugh at trans people and say that they're stupid and delusional anymore. I have to actually argue against them. I think that you should be able to construct arguments for things that are good and arguments against things that are bad. Laughing at someone because they're different from you is not a very good argument. In fact, that's just the ad populum fallacy again.
And if you fail to construct this argument, we have to change society overnight.
Who's saying that, like, we absolutely have to change society overnight? I think that we generally know that, like, these are slow processes that happen over time, and, you know, advocating for rights is an ongoing process.
The reality is the way that most of us interact with the world is that we receive wisdom from our parents, from the society around us. This is a form of data. Thomas Sowell has pointed this out. If wisdom has been tested over the course of thousands of years and found to be durable, discarding that for no apparent reason would be an incredibly stupid thing to do. But we as a society have decided that it's no longer okay to simply point at tradition or point at traditional wisdom. Instead, we have to come up with some sort of logic as to why that works.
Yes, traditions should be justified or else they should be discarded. Say, like, it was traditional for a society to sacrifice babies. I don't think that's a very good thing. Even if traditional wisdom held that we have to sacrifice babies to the rain god to prevent floods from happening, you know, I think that we should be logical about this and recognize that sacrificing babies isn't going to change the rain one way or another, and we should stop sacrificing babies. This idea that traditional wisdom always holds is completely silly. Traditions need to justify their existence or else they should be discarded.
It shifts the burden of proof, modern society, away from the people who wish to tear down these institutions and onto the people who wish to defend these institutions.
I think that both sides propose arguments, and I think that both sides should propose arguments. I, all the time, propose arguments for the advancement of trans rights. I just think that you should be able to do the same. If you believe that your traditions are worth defending, you should point out why they are better than the progress that we seek. But they're not. That's why you don't want to resort to rationalism. You are afraid of rationalism because your ideas are irrational.
Now, in the West, there are really only a couple of values that remain. Jonathan Haidt, the sociologist, points this out. He says there are a couple of values that are left: harm and fairness. Right? Are you harming somebody, and is it fair? These are the only two things that seem to matter to the modern individual. Other values that conservatives have traditionally prized, like loyalty for or respect for authority or purity, these have all been discarded.
These kind of values need to prove their worth. Why would you want to respect unjust authority? I think that respect should be earned, especially when we're talking about authority. And as far as, like, purity, you would need to demonstrate the benefits of purity for whatever type of purity you're referring to. I don't think that saving themselves for marriage or whatever makes them any happier. If someone's not harming themselves, let them do what they want. Like, doesn't Ben Shapiro claim to be a libertarian? He's such an authoritarian, although he claims to be a libertarian. It's pretty funny.
Haidt writes in a great book that you should read called The Righteous Mind, Westerners will now defend pretty much anything, up to and including the right of a man to buy a chicken at the supermarket and have sex with it.
What? What? Who is saying this? His sources, I made it up, of course.
It says, quote, "If you're an educated and politically liberal Westerner, you'll probably give another nuanced answer, one that acknowledges the man's right to do what he wants as long as he doesn't hurt anyone." Here's the thing, though. Jonathan Haidt doesn't actually go far enough. In our society, we no longer ask if it's okay for a man to go down to the supermarket, buy a frozen chicken, and have sex with it. We don't ask if it's okay. We say that that's now an identity.
What? That's now an identity? What's the identity? Because I have never heard that. I've been a queer person for quite a while, and I have never heard anybody who's like, I'm part of the LGBTQ community because I have sex with frozen chickens. I've never heard that before. I think Ben's making it up. That's pretty crazy. Wowee. But yeah, if you're trying to talk about that from a harm perspective, this would be like food that could go to someone else that would be wasted. And also, like, you can get diseases from, like, you know, raw chicken. So, like, you can talk about harms as far as that is concerned. That's pretty weird. Ben has this interesting obsession with frozen chickens. And Dylan Mulvaney, I guess.
And if you say that it's bad, there is something morally wrong with you.
Not at all. I just gave a couple reasons why you can say it's bad. You can also talk about how there are better things that you could use instead of a frozen chicken for that very purpose. I do not think anybody has a problem with you criticizing the frozen chicken.
That being a chicken copulator is a form of who you are. And if anybody says differently, if anybody says that this is bad or wrong, this means that they are some sort of bigot.
Yep, I don't think it's bigoted to say that you probably shouldn't be having sex with a frozen chicken. I don't think anybody here is saying that. Yeah, necrophilia, bestiality, not part of the LGBTQ community. You're kind of just making that up, Ben.
Well, if this is what transgressivism pushes, this idea that
It's not. That's not what we're pushing. So I guess Ben's just arguing against things we don't believe, as per usual.
Everything that has made human beings traditionally, that all of the things that make people feel embedded and whole and fulfilled need to be discarded. How exactly was this crammed down not only on society, but especially on children, and why on children?
The idea of having sex with a frozen chicken is being pushed onto kids. I think that you're the only one who's talking about this, Ben. If anybody's pushing this onto kids or society or whatever, it's you. I have not once talked about having sex with frozen chickens on my stream until you brought it up, Ben.
There's a video that was released by the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. The chorus has a mission, according to its website. We evolve society's views toward LGBTQ people through our commitment to excellence. This commitment to excellence caused them to release a video. It was a song called Message from the Gay Community, and the lyrics went something like this. You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked. Honey, just this once, you're correct. We'll convert your children, happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it. We'll convert your children, we'll make them tolerant and fair. We're coming for them, we're coming for your children.
Ben's getting triggered that we want to convert children to being tolerant and fair to others. Oh no, stop converting my children into being respectful human beings that show each other love. Stop trying to make my kids love each other. Stop it. They never said they're trying to convert your kids into being gay. They just want your kids to be tolerant. And I think that's a perfectly fine thing to ask.
Targets kids. They have to, because here's the thing. If you wish to construct a society that hates all the institutions, you have to start with a crowd of people who haven't been shaped and molded by the institutions. Right? All of the people in this room, you're all adults. This means that you've been shaped and molded by institutions. You may have some pre-existing notions of what right and wrong constitute, what's good and bad. But if you start with the kids and you blow up the institutions for the kids, you can shape them in whatever direction you want. And the transgressives are not hiding the ball in this particular respect.
That we're trying to teach kids that they should accept other people that are not harming anyone. I advocate for teaching about diversity and acceptance because it leads to a more accepting, diverse society that does not socially ostracize people. And that's a good thing. When we reduce social ostracization, people are more so able to live their lives free from marginalization. They're more able to self-actualize, become happy, healthy, productive members of society. That's a good thing that helps us all. I guess I'm guilty of trying to make society a better, more productive place for everyone. Guilty as charged.
They actually believe they're doing a favor to kids. They're liberating the kids. Because after all, if you get rid of all these institutions, kids can lead more fulfilled, fluid, happy lives.
What institutions are we talking about? I don't think we're trying to destroy all of Western civilization or whatever you think that means. Specifically, what institutions do you think we're trying to get rid of? I'd like to see some more concrete discussion here. But of course, Ben's going to keep it vague.
The most obvious manifestation of this, which we've seen pretty much all over the United States, is Drag Queen Story Hour or family-friendly drag shows across the country. Why is this happening? Well, the answer is, again, it is promotion of transgressivism. Drag is by necessity and by definition transgressive. It's about violating rules. Targeting this message toward kids is seen, apparently, as a good thing, because drag is a way of broadening minds or blurring boundaries.
What's wrong with drag? Somebody wears clothes that are gender atypical. What's wrong with that? I'm really interested to see if Ben Shapiro can actually provide an argument as to why there's something inherently wrong with drag.
The Drag Queen Story Hour organization itself argues such events are necessary in order to allow kids to, quote, see people who defy rigid gender restrictions and imagine a world where everyone can be their authentic selves.
I don't think anyone's saying that Drag Queen Story Hour is necessary. I just think that people should have the freedom to express themselves, and say a family wants to go to a drag queen story hour or whatever, they should have the freedom to do so. It doesn't seem to harm anyone. Intrinsically, drag is just a performance art. There are absolutely lots of forms of family-friendly performance art.
And this is the mode of pure transgressivism. Your authentic self lies in your subjective sense of what you are, unshaped by any institutions, and we will show you a bunch of men twerking in front of you dressed as women.
That's not what family-friendly drag shows are. Ben is twisting and shifting the statements here. That's pretty deceptive, my dude.
In order to help you destroy those institutions.
What's the institution that we're destroying? Wait, Drag Queen Story Hour is destroying institutions? What? What institution is being destroyed by, a kid being read a book by, a drag queen at, a library or something? What institution is that destroying? That's a wild statement.
All this stuff is incredibly dangerous for kids. Kids require stability.
How is it dangerous for a kid to be read a book by a drag queen? How is that dangerous?
Require rules. Kids require institutions. Kids require the teaching of traditional wisdom. Kids do not require men dressed in thongs twerking in their face.
Nobody said it's required. It's just a type of performance art that some people are interested in seeing.
So then we have to ask another question, which is, how did so many parents buy into this? How have so many adults bought into the idea that all of this is okay for kids, because this is a pretty predominant view in large segments of this country now.
Notice how Ben just shifted the goalpost again. He switched from, viewing it as necessary to viewing it as okay. I don't think anybody believes that seeing a drag queen is necessary.
Well, the answer is sticks and carrots. So the media and social media provide the carrot. They treat transgenderism as uniquely strong and heroic. As Joe Biden put it, quote, transgender people are some of the bravest people in our nation. The media like to feature trans kids and suggest that these are heroic people who are standing for their authentic selves. And by the way, the best parents are the ones who have the trans kids. The best parents are people who allow their children to be who they authentically are, meaning parents who tell their kids they're not who they authentically are, like in their own sex. They're actually a member of the opposite sex. And the sooner they socially transition, the more authentic they are.
I don't think anybody's claiming that, like, as soon as you identify as trans or whatever, you instantly change your biology. Nobody's claiming that. What we are claiming is that medical transition does change aspects of your biology. Social transition changes how people perceive and treat you. And if somebody desires those changes, they should be able to have the freedom to seek those changes.
It tends to resonate with particular groups of people. Bill Maher correctly pointed out that this is a social contagion and it is taking place specifically in blue areas. If you go to red areas, you will find virtually no quote-unquote trans kids.
That's just not true. There are trans people across all states. When the Florida Board of Medicine voted to medically detransition all trans teenagers, there were so many people that showed up to that because there are trans teenagers in Florida that are being medically detransitioned by overriding the legislative process and anti-democratically just voting to ban something that their fifis disagreed with. There was all that panic when Texas passed the gubernatorial order to investigate, like, the parents of trans kids for, like, abuse. There was a lot of freak out about that because there are trans kids.
That is not because
there are multiple trans kids in any school with enough people. And I think that's more of like a population density thing than like red versus blue.
biology suddenly bottlenecking in Los Angeles or in Austin. It is because there is a social contagion that is happening right now across this country.
Now we're getting into the social contagion discourse, which, by the way, the origins of the social contagion discourse comes from a thoroughly debunked study where what the study authors did was they recruited transphobic parents from forums such as transgendertrend.com, and they asked these transphobic parents, do you think that your trans kids are, like, being influenced into being trans as part of a social contagion? And the transphobes said yes, and then they published their findings as, look at this, being trans is a social contagion. That is horrid research, and here Ben is touting that as something that is sound. But no, asking transphobes if they believe in the validity of trans people, of course they're gonna say no. That's all that the study really points out. That was a bit of an insane video. I still can't get over the part where Ben was talking about having sex with a frozen chicken. Ben's really bringing that into the discourse. That's so funny. Hey gamer, if you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, smash the motherfrickin' like button, and tap that bell icon. Everything you do helps me and the channel so much more than you realize. Thanks so much.